So good afternoon. My name is Jeff Preston. I'm the SEO manager at Disney Interactive. So Disney Interactive does most of the entertainment part of the Walt Disney Company. So we handle the websites and the apps. We handle most of the websites and apps. Some of the sites we work on are Disney.com, StarWars.com, Disney Infinity, Club Penguin, Babel. Mostly, again, most of the entertainment part of the Walt Disney Company. But I'm very glad to be here. I'm looking forward, I've learned a lot already today, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the week. On Sunday morning, I was in Monterey, California. If you're not familiar with California's geography, Monterey is up north near San Francisco. And I had to drive back to Los Angeles, drive back home to Los Angeles. So if you've ever driven from Northern California to Southern California, usually involves a stretch of road called the 5, or Interstate 5. Interstate 5 is, in one way, is very good because it's very fast. You can drive pretty fast on it, but it's also very, very slow, very boring, very, very straight, and there's not a lot to see. So when I was driving from Monterey to Los Angeles, I tended to, my mind wandered a lot. And I was thinking, with Father's Day coming up and all that, I was thinking about my father, who had passed away about 15 years ago, and that if he suddenly appeared in the car, was sitting next to me, what would we talk about? And so I imagined myself, the first thing my father probably asked me in the 15 years since I've seen him was, "What is that?" And like point to my iPhone that's attached to a suction cup to my windshield. And I was like, "Oh, it's my mobile phone." And he's like, "Well, why is there a map on it?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's our navigation." And he's like, "Well, how does it know the police is ahead?" And I'd say, "Well, someone that's driving ahead of us had to report that there was police." And then, "Well, how do they know who you are?" And I'm like, "Well, the computer knows that I'm driving behind that person and sends the signal." And then he'd probably ask me like, "Well, how does it know your friends are also driving too?" And I'd say, "Well, I attached the app to Facebook." And he's like, "Well, what's Facebook?" And so those boring hours I had driving from San Francisco to Los Angeles, we had this kind of long conversation with my deceased father. I hadn't taken any drugs or anything. It was just the time went by a little fast. But I imagined after explaining and trying to catch him up with the last 15 years of technology, that he'd probably ask me about legacy. And like, "Hey, are you, all the good things I taught you, are you passing that on to my children or his grandchildren? Are you passing those things on?" And we'd probably have a pretty serious interview the rest of the trip back home. But I started to think about that, and as far as like being a search marketer, what is our legacy, and what is it as we sort of go through this journey of being a search marketer? What's the main thing we have to deal with? And I'd probably say that the most significant thing is change. So a lot of those things I was trying to explain to if my father was sitting there, is about Google. Google didn't exist when he passed away. Facebook, apps, all of that real-time information, ad targeting, all of those things have popped up in the last 5 to 10 years are something that we've had to deal with. And whether we meet a lot of marketers like Marshall, who's been around for a long time, has been significant. The reason they've been around for so long is because they're very good at adapting to change. So I wanted to share some things that we've done and our team's done to try to keep up with the change, whether it's to our industry or to technology, but also just working in a big company that grows and changes a lot. So the first thing I want to share with, this is Disney.com. A few years ago, Disney.com was a bunch of different teams working on a bunch of different platforms, and they would publish. Like the movies team had their platform, the music team, the TV team. And so for the SEO team, it made it a little bit difficult, is that we had lots of different platforms to work on, lots of different stakeholders, different teams. And so the idea came out that we would make one publishing platform that everyone could use. So that decision was that we were going to create a new CMS. So a team was spun up to do that. We actually moved them across town so they wouldn't be in our office, so they wouldn't get pulled in so the day-to-day operations and running the website. And so they built this new CMS. So I was really excited. There had been an opportunity to bake a lot of SEO features into it. But then the question came up, what domain should we use? Should we continue to publish on Disney.com? Or should we use a new domain? So the SEO team's like, oh, we've been using go.com for 15 years. The rest of the Walt Disney Company's on it. Let's not change it. But of course, the executive decision was made. We're going to switch to Disney.com. So if you can imagine, we had to move 250 sites to a new domain in about 12 months. So again, I'm terrified. My hair's turning gray. And of course, the expectation is that don't lose any traffic the whole time you change domains. So the first thing we did is try to find out what all the risks were. One is I had no idea what Google and Bing were going to do when we moved all these Disney sites and switched domains, especially after we've had them there for 12 years on the old domain. The other thing is while we were making this transition, we'd be moving sites over. So our network of Disney.com content would be split between two domains. Had no idea what was going to happen. So, decision was made. The SEO team's like, yeah, we're on board. Let's go for it. Whatever we're going to do, let's do it in the most SEO-friendly way we can. So we got very involved in building this new CMS. We invited ourselves to all the meetings. And that became very, very important. I realized that if we just sent our SEO documents, here's what we want you to build, if we sent it off to the team, it probably wouldn't have been included. We had to really, really show the flag and be involved in every little decision along the way. I also communicated very heavily in writing and in person to our senior leadership that I had no idea what was going to happen as far as traffic when we switched domains. I was confident we were doing things the right way, but I sort of wanted to cover my buns a little bit that there could be a rough launch when we flipped the site. So the SEO team, we worked really hard. We spent lots of time filling out a whole wall full of what could possibly go wrong, what do we need to take care of. So these were some of the major things that we decided. One is that we were going to use online tools to collaborate all our changes. We had to do tens of thousands of redirects, but rather than, hey, let's try them on launch day, we set up a whole environment to test them before we got there. We also decided, okay, here are all of these internal things we were going to change, all these external things we had to change, and that we had a big plan. As soon as we flipped the DNS, that would submit a huge list of new URLs to Google. So we had this plan already. Of course, like any plan that you put together, it can tend to fall apart right at the end. So some of our challenges were, we had key engineering people that we were planning on for launch, and we had planned for months and months, sort of leave right before. So we had to find new people to accomplish those tasks. As we were testing the new site, right when we were getting ready for launch, like SEO stuff started disappearing and then reappearing, and it was just everyone was sort of scrambling at the end to get the product on time. We knew that not all of the content was going to be ready for launch, so it would be split between two domains. So that was something for us to deal with. 3 days before launch, my hard drive blows up, with all these plans on. So of course, I had a lot of it backed up, but it was just sort of a last minute thing to stress out about. And it ended up, whenever we do a big major product launch, we have a war room. But because we had actually 2 war rooms because the teams were too big and they're about 5 miles apart in North LA. So we had to put half the SEO team in one and the other half was in the other just to make sure we had good coverage. So we went to the launch, and here's some things we learned from doing this launch, which was basically changing domains for a huge brand for about 250 sites. We felt like the best practice was to gradually introduce URLs to Google and to Bing and let them see, hey, we're moving something, we're moving to a no domain, here's some content to crawl. And then when we did that, those sites didn't perform well. The sites that we just in bulk moved 10,000 URLs and sort of ripped the Band-Aid off, those sites did the best. So it was sort of opposite what we thought was going to happen and what we thought sort of the industry best practice. We also realized that Google, in many instances for our Disney.com site, it did not honor the canonical tag. We had put canonical tag in old content and say, hey, here's the new content, and they kept sending traffic to the old content. So that was something interesting, that there's some kind of signal that they don't want to follow the canonical tag, even though that's their published best practice. We also realized that if you're upgrading your publishing platform to much better CMS, much better caching, everything's a lot better, that might outweigh moving to a weaker domain. That's what happened with us. The other interesting thing that I had no idea what was going to happen was when we changed, ESPN's rankings started jumping up and down on ABC and ABC News and the parks. So lots of other sites within the Walt Disney Company as an enterprise, all of their search traffic basically started freaking out when Disney.com moved. It was something we didn't anticipate, but it seemed like we had thrown a big rock in the algorithm pond, and it just put waves throughout the Walt Disney Company. A couple of things I thought, in retrospect, we did well, and it seemed to work for us. One is that we got involved very, very early and very often. We spent a lot of times going to meetings, to inviting ourselves to meetings, just to make sure that everything that had to do with search was covered in this big project. We measured before and after, so we knew what the impact of all our changes were. We had very extensive written plans the SEO team did to cover everything that we had to do. We got up to about 30 pages of a checklist of all the things we wanted to do. The other thing that was very important is we had to stay calm. A lot of things kind of went wrong on launch day, and kind of your best laid plans. I was just moderating our best laid plans of my submit, kind of just didn't work as smoothly as we thought, but we had to be calm. While some other teams might have got more animated, I felt like the SEO team, we kept it together, at least kept our poker faces on. So this was it was kind of a big change, switching domains. It kind of got dumped in our lap. We weren't planning on doing it, but somehow we survived. And then if you search for Disney, Disney.com shows up. So about 6 weeks after we finished this big domain change and migration, I was feeling kind of still coming down off the high of getting that all done. And one of our senior leaders came up to me. He's like, "Hey, we just bought Lucasfilm." And I was like, "What?" And I remember exactly where I was standing in the office. So I'm like, "Oh, that's great. We bought Lucas. All of these stories that I grew up with, like Indiana Jones and the Star Wars films, that was something we get to work on." And then about 30 seconds later, I'm like, "I should go check those sites," because they're probably going to roll up to me, and that's sort of what happened. So the next big thing I wanted to talk about was how to manage change if there's an acquisition. And so Lucasfilm was a big acquisition. Marvel a couple of years ago was a big acquisition, where suddenly you have a whole brand, lots of new sites to work on, and new teams to integrate. So what we did and how we handled this kind of change was everyone that was at Lucas, we welcomed them very, very warmly. I'm sure they were a little bit shocked that they're a billion-dollar company, very, very, very successful, have a great culture, and they got acquired by a bigger company. So I think at the individual, personal level, they might have been a little nervous, so we wanted to welcome them as warmly as possible. They're based in San Francisco, we're in LA, so whenever we flew back and forth, we wanted to make sure that they had a great time, and they knew that we cared about them as fellow team members. The other thing is that, of course, we did all our audits and prepared for when the Lucas leadership came down to LA. We'd be ready to talk about their sites as far as SEO, and that they would have lots of questions. The other thing I started to realize is, if anyone has been through an acquisition, it's kind of nerve-wracking to be acquired, and you never quite know what's going to happen to you. Are you going to become redundant? Is there someone else that's going to replace you? And so as the SEO team, and we were talking about with their search team, is to kind of put that in our back of our minds that they probably are pretty stressed out of being acquired, and that we should have a lot of empathy and try to understand where they're coming from. So the one thing we learned also with the Lucasfilm acquisition is that it was very tempting for me to say, like, "Hey, you guys need to start doing all your SEO processes exactly like us." But actually, that's probably wasn't the best way to do it, is that we had to invite them. And so as we built relationships with them, these individuals in the company we acquired, as we kept inviting them, like, "Hey, we feel like this is a better process, it's worked well for us," people responded better. that when we persuaded them, rather than we just started commanding them like, hey, you got to start doing everything this way. We made sure that when we found out who the key players are, that we met with them and we set up regular one-on-one meetings with all of those key players to make that transition and that change a lot easier. Another thing I want to talk about is about when you change your boss. So, I don't know if you saw this movie, Tom Hanks pretended to be our boss for 2 hours in our movie, so this was pretty good. But one thing, if you work for a big company, there's going to be a lot of leadership changes. The SEO team might move from technology to product, to the content team, back to technology. It could bounce all around, and when all those changes happen, it can be something that you have to deal with. So a couple things that we've done is when we've moved around and when we've got reorg, is whatever our new leadership was, we would onboard them immediately and say, hey, this is the SEO team, this is what we're doing, this is what we're working on, these are our priorities, here are some of the things we're doing well, here are some opportunities that we can do better. So as they're formulating their plans, they'll know where you're coming from. The other thing I think is important when you have leadership is they probably have a pretty good vision where they want to go, and that's why they became a senior leader, and then it's important for us to sort of align to their vision. So the more you can learn about them before you go have that first meeting, that should really inform how you explain what you do. The other thing is, to be frank, like getting a new boss is kind of a hassle, and it can be kind of difficult. However, it's always a great opportunity to learn, and that you can have this great opportunity to learn from someone new that have lots of strengths. I think of all my bosses I've had at Disney, they've all been very, very different, personality-wise and also skill set-wise. So it can become a great opportunity for the team to learn from someone new. So instead of, again, thinking about it as it's a hassle, think about it, it's a great opportunity to seize. Okay, Danny, are your kids playing Disney Infinity?
Yes.
They are?
I've got my house is full.
Okay, good, thank you. Thank you. So we're in September, October, we're gonna have all these Marvel ones that are gonna join, so you can have like Mater and Captain America fighting together. So that's gonna be pretty fun. So,
Start saving some money.
right. Start saving it. Start saving. So the one thing that we have to deal with, again, as being in a big company, is when we go through all those reorgs, suddenly you have a bunch of new team members join your team, and you find out, like, okay, you guys are on Jeff's team, or things change a lot with individuals. So it's actually a great opportunity to get new people, because you're like, oh, now I can do a lot more work and get a lot more things done. So again, one thing that we've tried to work on when we're getting new people come into our org is, again, to welcome them very warmly. We're so glad you're here. We're so glad you could join the team. We're looking forward to your contribution. And so rather than like, oh, you're the new guy, like, I guess we'll work together, but actually make it kind of a party or an event that we're going to be working together. Again, when you get new people, trying to understand their backgrounds or strengths. A lot of people come from a computer science background, so the editorial side's a little bit different for them. So getting them to on board about editorial. But if you have people that are strong in editorial, getting them into the tech is what we've been trying to do, so that everyone is trained to do all the parts of search marketing very well. The other thing I think we've done that's worked out for us is to hold people accountable very quickly. I think the worst thing for me is or the thing that drives me crazy is to be bored and not to have anything to do. So when you have new team members come on, like, hey, welcome, we're glad you're here, you're a buddy now, but here's your sites, and you have a very short runway to get up to speed and get these going. I think people respond better, at least in our experience, people respond better when you give them a lot of responsibility and give them an opportunity to deliver on that. Okay, I had a very long flight with Chris over here recently, and then I was on the plane. I rewatched this movie, A Miracle. It's about the hockey team in 1980 in Lake Placid. It's a pretty good movie, got me sort of psyched up. But the one thing that in this movie it comes out that was very powerful was the attitude, and that he believed that he could beat the Russians. He goes, yeah, if we play 10 times, 9 times they'll beat us, the Soviets would beat us, but that one time maybe we could win, and this is the time. And he really, really wanted to instill those beliefs with this whole team, and they responded very, very well. So the last thing I was going to say, that it becomes important as part of us to be a leader, and also as a search marketer, is that we have to have a positive attitude. We have to sort of force ourselves or do Jedi mind tricks to ourselves, is that we keep a positive attitude towards our leadership, towards our organization, to our sites and our products, and that even though there's lots of room for improvement and there are lots of things we could do better, that we're sort of forcing ourselves to be positive about it. If we as the leader of the search marketing team, if we're very negative, the guys that are reporting up to us are going to start becoming very negative too. And then it also can sort of poison our relationship with the other teams we deal with if we're sort of the source of gloom and doom within our organization. So it's important for us to check that if we have a positive attitude, and make sure that we're being the one that's being positive and optimistic that we're going to be accomplishing these things. Of course, we have lots of room for improvement. There's lots of opportunities to do better, but that we should have that positive attitude. The other thing I think is very important is that we take personal responsibility for the results. Again, dealing with change is very difficult. You think about Panda 4 in the last couple of weeks, and it's easy if one of our sites goes down just to blame it's Google's fault, our site's going down. But actually, I'm responsible for the search traffic for Disney.com. It's not Google's fault if it goes down. It's something I've got to figure out. So again, if we're taking responsibility, no matter how much change is coming, Marshall was talking earlier about the image search, is we just got to figure out a way, if it's our team, if it's our site that's going down, to fix that. Sort of blaming others or blaming Google, especially in front of all of the people that we lead, is not very productive. The last thing I would say about managing change in a big company is to be calm. There's going to be lots and lots of changes. There's lots of disruptive technology we've discussed earlier today that's going to change what we're doing in 2 or 3 or 4 years out. So we just have to be calm through that. We also have to be very patient. There's going to be lots of things to deal with. One of the hardest things is that, we wish you had a mulligan for all the mistakes or a do-over for all the mistakes I've made over the years, but there's nothing I can do about it now. So instead of just dwelling upon those mistakes, is just try to learn from them. If it's some process problem that we keep making a mistake on, is to instill that in our process so we know that we're getting better and better as we go forward. I think having that kind of attitude, especially if you're leading a team, will help you sort of manage that and get through that a lot better. So again, I want to thank you for listening. I'm looking forward to, I see a lot of friendly faces in the audience and then fellow Disney team members here, cast members here, but I'm looking forward to meeting you, and again, I appreciate the invitation, and looking forward to talking over the next couple days. So thank you.